I was talking to Tanis yesterday about the census, and I just wanted to, I really feel like people have to fill it out, because I was telling her that when I did I did some Ancestry.com. I went on Ancestry.com and I found out a lot of stuff about my family members because of the census. I found out that they worked this job and they worked that job and they lived in this place. And it's really so important to, for us to have record our stories. So I'm telling everyone, please fill out the census. Please tell everybody else to fill out the census, because it really is a way to tell your story. And, we don't have our story told often. People don't tell our story all the time. So we need to do that.
Yes, and that's why we're here at Sacred Spaces. It's specifically for elder storytelling. Today we have Miss Nadema Agard, our featured guest, and an elder whom we love, and who we also created programming around to show more support and to get more connection with her and others. So I hope everyone in the session enjoys all of her stories that she's going to share, and hopefully learns something from it, and hopefully we can pave the way for future generations. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Nadema.
You're welcome. Well, many of you may or may not know that I was born in New York City, and I grew up in East Harlem and the South Bronx, and then I came back to East Harlem, and then I went up to Inwood. And Inwood has been my neighborhood since I was about 12 or 13 or 14 years old, I would say. That's been the place where I have lived the longest, and I still live here in Inwood. But at one point in my life, I moved away for 7 years, and we'll get to that when we get to the decades. So I was born in 1948 in a hospital here in New York, and my family lived in East Harlem, and then my parents got divorced or separated, and I went to live with my grandmother in the projects in East Harlem. And it was quite a childhood, needless to say. Growing up in New York City, if any of you have, then you can understand how we are as unique as New York cities as we are as indigenous people, because New York cities have their own tribal, culture. So I grew up in the projects, and it was a really interesting time. And I have been thinking about it a lot, because I reconnected with some people that I knew when I was 12 years old, that when I, moved away, and reconnected with this kid named Salvador. That was like, he was like the youngest of a family across the hall. And he always had a binky in his mouth, and I just got reconnected with him, and he's 60 something years old. The last time I saw him, he was like a little kid with a little binky. And we just started talking about, all that stuff that happened when I was growing up there. It was an interesting childhood, because there were all kind of people. I lived next door to a Jamaican woman. Then there was this African-American woman that had one white glove before Michael Jackson made it popular. And nobody knows why. But, and then there were a lot of Puerto Rican families moving in at that time. And that was like, looking out the peephole, like, oh, the Puerto Ricans are moving in, And then, of course, I became friends with all of the Puerto Rican families. And my best friend was Nancy on the 5th floor. Then they had a whole bunch of kids on the 2nd floor, and like there were large families, and there were all kind of wonderful people. There were Irish people, and they had their St. Patrick's Day time, and my grandmother drank some beer that was green, and she got sick and threw up all over me, and I was like, oh my God, because my grandmother never drank, so it was like scary, And my grandmother was born of a family of a woman, very wealthy. Her mother was an heiress. Her mother was a member of a very you know, they would have been billionaires now, you know. And she married my great grandfather, who was an Indian from Virginia. So in Virginia, he had family in Virginia, and they did, you know, they did all right because he had sisters that were teachers and stuff. But in New York, he was a servant. He was a coachman for this really rich guy who was like a politician or something. And then he met my great grandmother while he was playing cards with his boss. And then, you know, they eloped, and then, you know, they had all these children, one of which was my grandmother. So a lot of people don't know my grandmother came from a family, you know, I mean, it was just like she didn't know that family. I found out about it later when someone was doing research on the family. I found out about it later. I did not know their story was in the newspaper and all of that because it was a big scandal and stuff. So my grandmother, she was a character, and she always, you know, she had been straight hair, so she was always like perming it so that it would be, you know, kinky and curly. And she always you know, she put bluing in it, and it always looked like purple. So, you know, she would go to school, you know, to talk to my teachers, and then I'd say to them, you know, did my grandmother come? She says, yeah, the nice lady with the purple hair and the, you know, she wore anklets from the 40s, you know. She's still wearing the 40s style. We were in the 50s and 60s. So, so, you know, and that there was a family across the hall named the Santanas, and his name was, father's name was Gaucho. And my grandmother would go up to Rose to say, hi, Rose, how's Groucho? And the lady, she was so polite. She never corrected my grandmother, you know. But there was the Nakari family. They were Polish and Italian. And Mr. Nakari had a gas station on FDR Drive, about 100th Street or 99th Street. I forget what street it was, but it was right at the end of the projects. And he said, everybody called me Peachy because my grandfather nicknamed me Peachy because I had no hair when I was born. So everybody nicknamed me Peachy. So they said, Peachy, do you want to make some money? And I said, yeah, Jimmy. He says, could you paint Santa Claus on my window, you know, for Christmas time? And I went in, I painted Santa and the sleigh and the whole 9 yards. And he paid me $5, man. That was a lot of money in the 50s. I went to the 5 and dime, and I got 5 Christmas gifts for people in my family. So I went to an elementary school in the neighborhood, but I was lucky because the teacher thought that they should put me in a better situation academically. So I started going to one of the Silk Stocking junior high schools. It's called Wagner Junior High School. And it was where a lot of rich kids went. So it was like culture shock coming from the projects and then going to the school where a lot of rich kids, you know, people whose parents were TV producers that lived on Fifth Avenue. And actually I went to someone's house. One of my classmates invited me to her house on Fifth Avenue. So it was like, you know, really amazing. But, you know, at the same time, they thought, people in that school thought where we lived was really horrible and how could we stand living there? And it was, you know, it wasn't. It was just people that, you know, lived there, and they were all different nationalities. And we went to the candy store, was owned by Jewish people. Then the Germans had the donut bakery shop. And then everybody used to go to St. Lucy's Church, who was a Catholic church. And my grandmother wasn't Catholic because my grandmother's family was, on her father's side, was from Virginia. They were Baptists. So my grandmother one time went to a church in the neighborhood that was like a Protestant church. And it was so dull, you know, when I went in there, and we didn't really go to church, but when I went in there, it was like really dull, you know. It was just like white walls and wooden benches. And then when I would go to the Catholic church, it was like, wow, you know, all the smells and the incense and the statues and the colors. It was like, you know, very appealing to me as a child. It was very beautiful. And you know, eye candy. So I told my grandmother, I said, can I go to the Catholic church? And she said, yeah, you can go to the Catholic church. I said, I went to the Catholic church. And then, of course, they brainwashed me and they told me that my grandmother wasn't Catholic. She was going to go to hell. So I went and I said, Grandma, you got to become Catholic, you know, or else you go to hell. She says, listen, you go to your church and I go to mine. And, you know, that's the way it was in our family. Everybody, you know, whatever religion they were, they accepted you and you practiced whatever religion you wanted to. And that was also true, you know, with many Indian families. And so then my grandmother, I became Catholic and I took the Holy Communion and I did the whole 9 yards, the confirmation. But it was very short-lived because when the Puerto Ricans were moving in, the Italian priest was very upset with them coming to the church. And I found that kind of really not very Christian or very Catholic. So I kind of like dropped out of going to church. And that was the end of that. And then when I was in junior high school, I moved up to Inwood. And my brother used to play ball with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you know. He was really tall and I would see him on the train coming home from high school. And he was so tall that he had to bend over, you know, to sit. Even though he was sitting, he still had to bend over. And I recently reconnected with some people from Dykeman, and they went to see Kareem Thanksgiving because they're really close friends with him. And they sent me a beautiful snapshot from LA where he lives to me saying hi, and Kareem said hi to me, and I said, oh, that's cool. So then I went to a specialized art high school. But before I went to high school and when I was still living with my grandmother, my father took me to the window and he pointed out to the window that, you see those people out there? And I said, yeah, what about them, Daddy? Well, you're not like them. I said, what do you mean I'm not like them? He says, you're Blackfeet Sioux. See, Hasapa Lakota, you're not like them. And it was like, okay, you know, and that was really important. My grandmother never really talked that much about her Indian father, but my father's father was Lakota. So he had the strong sense of being Lakota. So he taught me that. And I got that strong sense of being Lakota from my dad. Then my mom's family, they were Cherokee. And my grandmother, they were like really Indian Amish. I mean, they never went out anywhere and they didn't want you to bother with anybody. And every time we went out, my grandmother would always tell us, don't forget who you are. And, you know, at the time when I was a kid, I didn't understand it. And I thought, what is that? You know, why is she always saying that? But it was just like, you know, I explain to people now, it's just like, this is our country. But yet, if we forget who we are, you know, there's no other country to go back to. You know, like if you're Italian, you forget who you are, I can go to Italy and remember again. But, you know, so I went to the High School of Music and Art. I was accepted to the Specialized High School of Music and Art. It's now called LaGuardia. But it was really beautiful. It was like so, not like American high schools. We didn't have a prom or anything. Everybody thought that wasn't everybody thought that was very uncool. And there's my son, Brandon. Happy birthday, Brandon. So, anyway, so then after I went to High School of Music and Art, which was a really extraordinary high school. It was so really special. And Brandon also went to that high school for a short time. I don't know how many of you know anything about Music and Art High School, but the students were visual art students, and they were also music students. So you would hear people singing. You would hear people singing down the staircase. It was like the fame school, okay? It was like the fame school because people were like singing as they went up and down the staircase. And we had jazz musicians play at our dances that were professional who used to play in clubs at night. you know, with grown-ups. So we were really sophisticated, really sophisticated music appreciation. You know, we weren't the standard American high school at all. So that was my experience. And then from music in our high school, I still have friends from that time, Joaquin and some other people. So, and Yuri Kochiyama's daughter, Ori Kochiyama, the famous civil rights activist, Japanese American, her daughter also was one of my close friends, and another artist named Tomi Arai, who also is an artist and is very prominent in the Asian American community. So we were like, you know, we still have these connections with music and art, and it's really wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and I took classes in drawing, I took classes in painting, I took classes in pottery, but we also had academics, so our day was longer because we had to have the English and the foreign language and science and social studies and all of that, you know. So, so that was my background in terms of like my education. And then I went to NYU. I got a full scholarship to go to NYU. At the time, the scholarship was $2,000. I mean, the tuition was $2,000 a year. And I got an $1,800 scholarship. So my family had to come up with $200. And back in that day, that was a hardship, you know? And, but we managed to, you know, pay the other $200. So I went to a really beautiful high school. I went to an excellent college, you know, and I studied art education because my father was a portrait artist, a photographer. He used to do murals, and I got his, you know, art talent. So I became an artist and went to art school and went to NYU for art education. So Brandon is trying to distract me right now. I don't know if you noticed. So I went to NYU, and that's when I met Charmaine Lyons and Charmaine.
Brandon, this is streaming on Facebook also. I'm not sure if you know that.
I know, Brandon. This is streaming on Facebook, okay?
We have record of it.
Now, good. So I went to NYU, and I got an art education degree. And then I finished with a BS in art education, and then I started teaching in the New York City public school system. I started teaching in a junior high school in 1970. And that was a crazy experience, let me tell you. So it was right after the strike, and the kids were like out of control and everything. And but what I did when I taught the kids was I taught them that who they were beautiful, because the curriculum didn't have anything about people of color at all, you know. It was very Eurocentric. So I would bring in art from Native America, from Africa, from Asia, and then I would expose my students to all the different ideas and concepts of what is making art. And I remember one year that we did African-inspired, kente cloth inspired things, and then we did masks, and we did, you know, and I did portraits of very famous people like Queen Liliuokalani and Chief Joseph, and I put those portraits up in the classroom so that they could see that there were people of color. And at the time, it was, you know, during the AIM movement, and everybody thought I was like a little bit of a radical and whatever. So I continued to do that. And I had a class at the school. There was a woman named Maria, and she was a Latina Puerto Rican woman. And one day she came in with a big fro. And I said, you know, Maria, how come you wearing that wig? You know, because it was a wig. It was a big Afro wig. And I said, Maria, how come you wearing that wig? She goes, I'm in solidarity with my sister, Angela. And I says, oh. Then I found out that she was Angela Davis's bodyguard. Wow. So at the time I was making jewelry, and I used to make like these really nice chokers, like, they were like, you know, they weren't like your everyday common. They were like more like elegant and custom chokers, you know. So I was making those chokers, and so she bought one for Angela. So so one day, you know, meanwhile, the American Indian movement was going on, and I wound up going to a rally with a group of Indians from New York City to Madison Square Garden, and I got to meet Angela Davis because Maria brought her over and says, oh, Angela, I want you to meet the Native American sister who made your choker. And she said, you know, she gave me that power, you know, power to the people thing, you know. She's really tall. And at that time, Russell Means of the American Indian Movement was speaking, and that's why we were there, because we were his contingent. So, as I think I might have read that the last time, but maybe not everybody heard it. But Russell, and you know, was walking. He had talked, and he had inspired all of these people, because at one point there was a drum group and they were singing, and this Lakota drum in Madison Square Garden. People were going insane. They were screaming. They were going crazy. They were loving it. And then Russell grabs his Indian baby and says, yeah, the future of Native American. Everyone went completely crazy. And then afterwards, you know, when he left, we all went to go with him. And we were behind him as he was walking down the hall. The contingent of, you know, we were like his groupies, you know. And we were like behind him. And all of a sudden, this lady says, oh, Russell. Oh, Russell. Oh, that was so, wow. And then Russell turned to the guy, and he looks at him and he says, who the hell is that? And the guy said, seriously, Russell, you don't know who that is? He says, no, who is this? Jane Fonda, you know? And at the time, you know, we saw a lot of celebrities, like, because they were all coming out to support AIM, and we met a lot of celebrities. The guy that played Superman, Brooke Shield, Harry, I went to the home of Harry Belafonte, actually, because his wife bought some chokers for me. And Greg Allman, you know, also wanted my choker, and I sold it to him. And my brother was really upset because I only charged him $50. But I thought that was fair, you know. And it was, you know, during the American Indian movement, and then we had the people are going to the big American Indian movement gathering in Mulbridge, South Dakota. And I went there, and it was also on Standing Rock, is where my Lakota family is from. So it was the first time I had been out to my Lakota ancestral homeland. I was very excited, you know, to be there. And it was in Mulbridge. And it was really incredible. And Oren Lyons came, and I mean, he was a young man then, you know, and there was a whole delegations of 6 nations, and I was working registration, and it says, you know, Oren Lyons, and I looked up, you know, Oren Lyons, you know, because he was very well known even back then, you know. And Russell tried to get me to go skinny dipping with him, but I said, no, I don't think so. Because, you know, he snagged a lot of women, you know, and I didn't want to be with just one of those notches on his belt, you know what I mean? So he remembers me, you know, because later on in life, he came to the community house for the 25th anniversary, and he remembers me, you know, and he never forgot me. It's like that scene from that movie where that woman said, you won't forget me because I'm the one you didn't get, you know? And so, you know, but I really liked Russell, and my mother was at the community house that time, 25 years later, you know, the 25th anniversary of the community house. And I said to my mother, Mom, who does Russell remind you of? And without even a moment, she said, your father. He had that Lakota, my dad had that Lakota energy, you know, that Lakota way. And he was also a Scorpio, like, you know, Russell. So it's like, and it was really interesting because Russell had a daughter that was born the same day as my birthday. We're both born on the same day, and it's kind of interesting, you know. But yeah, that's right, Ty. Lakota, Scorpio. Oh my God. So anyway, so, and there were all kind of things, crazy things going on in New York City at the time. It was pretty wild. And I remember being in a bunch of places where people got a little out of control. But also when I lived in, I stayed in Minnesota for a while. And I was at this place called the Bear's Den, you know, and I always kind of knew when to leave, you know, just before things got really a little scary. And this woman came up to me, this big lady came up to me and she goes, oh, you're acting like you don't know me. And I said, what do you mean? I don't know you. She goes, oh, come on, I met you in Denver. I says, I've never been in Denver. Well, you must have a twin, you know, twin sister. I'm glad I got that cleared up with you because I was going to slap you, you know? So I said, you know what? I think I'm going to leave right now. And then I would leave and then I would go back to the, you know, we were all staying in this apartment, all these people, these Amesters. And when I would go back to the apartment and they would come and they'd be all bloody, you know, getting, you know, got punched in the nose or something. And Ty asked me if I met Anna Mae. Of course I met Anna Mae. I met her and I loved her. She was a tiny little woman. And she was, we were at a bar in, across from the McBurney Y, the Blarney Stone. Okay. And this was during some kind of demonstration at the United Nations. And all of these guys came in from Detroit. They were pretty much Ojibways. And I met my Ojibwe boyfriend, you know, I think it was then. But anyway, he was with that whole crew of people. I don't know if I met him then or whether I met him. I can't remember when I met him. Yeah, Ty, yeah, that's what they say. So anyway, and then, you know, so he was very handsome. He had green eyes. He was very, very good looking. And, but, you know, he had a lot of issues and we eventually broke up. But anyway, we were at a bar and Anna Mae was at the bar with us. And she got really upset behind something that someone did. And for the sake of her daughters, not to talk about the gory details of it, you know. But I got upset because she got upset and I was crying and I was telling her, don't be upset. Don't you do that. You were at the knee. You don't have, you know, forget about this, you know. And later on in life, I met her girls, when they were here for a screening of a movie about her life. And they were just so happy that I knew their mom. And then I saw Anna again in Canada when I was traveling with my Ojibwe boyfriend, Victor with the green eyes, you know, and we would go to powwows in Walpole Island. We went to Sarnia powwow. We went to Sault Ste. Marie. And I remember one time being in Sarnia and, you know, these guys started arguing and, you know, they were big guys and I kind of ran out of the bar and Victor started laughing at me. I said, yeah, I'm from New York. People don't just punch. They pull out knives and guns. I don't take a chance, you know. I mean, you know, everybody else was just sitting there. But since I was from New York, I just ran out of the bar, you know. And then people were like continuing to drink and talk. And while these guys were fighting, like they couldn't be bothered, you know? And and I remember one of the guys was an Indian guy, but he was real light with light eyes, and they called him Viking, you know? And then his girlfriend said, don't let that guy insult you, the bartender. And it wasn't really anything, you know? It wasn't really anything. And then he just had a big old fight over nothing. And then in Detroit, where Victor lived, we used to go to these places called a party store to pick up some pop because everybody was on the wagon. And these older Indian couple, they asked us to go to the store and get some pop. So I said, okay. So they said, but be careful. I said, what do you mean be careful? They were like snipers. There were like always people getting shot. And then when we got to the party store, there was a long line of people. And then the guy at the cash register had a mean German Shepherd and a shotgun. And I said, man, I thought that, there were bad neighborhoods in New York. I take it back. I mean, that was rugged. Detroit at that time, it was rugged. But we used to go to a lot of the powwows, around Detroit, and there were a lot of, they were great. They were great powwows. And then that was in the 70s, like 73, Wounded Knee 73. And then after we had the conference in Mulbridge, that was where I first saw John Trudell and his wife and their children. And I remember how beautiful she was because I was sitting across the, we were in this huge big tent. And I was sitting and I saw her and she was holding the cradle board. And, I did a drawing of her. Because she was so beautiful. And she had the baby and she had the little toddler. And I don't know if you all know, but they were killed in a fire that was thought to be very suspicious, set by, certain people. And, his whole family was killed in that fire. And John just was an amazing person, how he was able to, to take that experience and channel it in a way that he expressed himself as an artist. So, and then I met this elder, John Fire, and he had braids, but the ends of his braids were blonde, And then people ask me, why is your hair yellow? He goes, well, I made a bet with someone and they said, he bleached his hair blonde because he wanted to see if blondes had more fun. Because there was a commercial on TV about blondes having more fun. And he says, well, I'm going to see, So when I saw him, his hair was, his braids were, long, but the ends were blonde. And then he looked at me, he said, you could fool some of the people some of the time. You can fool some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And I remember that I had asthma and there was this traditional medicine, what white people call medicine man, doctor, Indian doctor. And he gave me this medicine that took my asthma away. But I was in the hotel room because we were all at these, we were all in this big motel that the tribe owned. And I was sitting there and I was watching TV, but that medicine, I don't know what, I felt like I was tripping because it took away my asthma, but I was sitting there and I thought that Dr. John was at the AIM conference, because he was on TV and I go, oh, wow, Dr. John's here. But I realized now I was in my hotel room watching TV. So, but that was it was, and I went back to him for that medicine because it was really, it made me feel really good. But he said, no, he said, I only give it to you because, you know, you have asthma, but you can't, you know, we can't, that's why we can't let people know about this kind of medicine because they'll like abuse it, you know? So, yeah. And then, so he was a Nadema Society man, you know, from Wisconsin. And he was very well known in the community as you know, as a person who had a lot of traditional knowledge. And then there was this, because before I went to him, I went to this elder, I can't remember his name, but he was from the Creek Nation, something Deer, Philip Deer from the Creek Nation. And I gave him tobacco and I said, you know, I got asthma, can you help me? And he says, well, he says, go over to my daughter over there. She's got an inhaler. I thought it was very funny, you know, that I went in with tobacco and he tells me to go get an inhaler, you know. But yeah, so, you know, those are the crazy AIM days. And then the community house was really Wild West, you know, stuff going on. Talk about the Wild West shows, the community house parties, and the woman who started the community house, Miffy Hines, she used to give us money to have parties, but we would go and buy Coors beer because Coors was really popular. We couldn't get it in New York, and these guys drove all the way up from Oklahoma with cases of beer for us. And my husband and I used to have fry bread and parties with Coors beer and fry bread. And people used to come for miles. People used to come from Brooklyn. Frank Harjo, he actually came up the 101 city steps. And and you know, people really wanted to have that fry bread. They were willing to, you know, to come from anywhere. So we used to have fry bread chili parties. And I remember one Halloween that Bobby Yanko came dressed as a woman with a blonde wig. And my God, you know, it was hysterical. And Barbara Namias was dressed up like a streetwalker. It was just a fun crowd, you know. And when my husband and I got married, we had a wedding in my friend's loft and people wore t-shirts that had tuxedos printed on them. It was like very casual wedding reception. And all of those guys from Oklahoma, everybody came to that wedding reception and we had a wonderful time. And we used to go to different bars every time. Bar that would be close to the community house, we would make it an Indian bar. Like when we went to the powwow, we would go to the Blarney Stone bar. But then there was a bar around the corner from the community house that was on 13th Street. There was a community house that was, you know, on the corner of 13th and Broadway before I went to 708 Broadway. And I remember we went down to that bar and there's two individuals got into a fight where they were slapping each other. It was very funny. And one of the individuals, I said to my, the gentleman friend, let's take this person home before they get arrested. So we took that person home, but guess what? Somebody got arrested. Somebody that didn't do anything got arrested. And I think it was a Shinnecock guy, you know? And so it was like, Marguerite Smith told me she was, you know, she went to the jail, you know, or the police station with him to try to get him out of jail or whatever. I don't know if they arrested him or he was in jail, but they went to the police station. They were just, and then there was the community house gallery that Pete Jameson started. He had Edgar Hieperberg's had one of his first shows in New York City at the community house. And I was in one of those first shows, and my son, Brandon, was just a little boy. He was about, I guess he was about 2 or 3 years old. And there was a guy named Mark Silver from Six Nations, and he was there. And I was getting all this attention, and Brandon was really upset, you know, because I wasn't paying too much attention to him. And so he bit me right on my backside. He put his mouth, he bit into my bun. And my, his mouth, his wet mouth mark was all over, on the back of my, my dress or my skirt. And so everybody nicknamed him Bun Biter. The Bun Biter, you know? And, and I remember us going to the powwow, and we ran, and then Muriel Tarrant was a little girl. Tina and Holly and them were teenagers. And I remember, like, I was with Joan Garabedian, and Muriel was like smoking a cigarette or something. And so we said to her, we're going to tell on you. She goes, I don't care. I always remember that about her. I don't care. So, and then I went to the powwow, and Mrs. Mofsey, I didn't know she was a matchmaker, but I went to the McBurney powwow, and there was a guy that saw me dancing, and he asked Mrs. Mofsey, did he know, he told me, I met him eventually, and he told me what happened. And Mrs. Mofsey says, no, she's got a son, she's divorced, and she's got a son, blah, 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 blah. So eventually I go to the community house for something, and I get a phone call from this man who's interested in dating me, because Mrs. Mofsey told him that I was going to be at the community house that night. So I picked up the phone, and I said, well, who would be calling me? Who knows I'm here? And he says, well, I can't really tell you. I eventually got it out of him, like, but, he said Mrs. Mofsey was like, she was very nice to him. And she goes, well, I know she's going to be at the community house next Thursday. And then, he called me, and I went on one date with him. But that was about it. So, and the other thing is that I met some Aboriginal Amesters at Pauline's house. My girlfriend Pauline had this apartment that a lot of Amesters used to have events there, And so that Pauline, they didn't really say, they kept on saying, something about Aboriginal brothers and sisters are going to come here. Oh, when are the Aboriginal brothers and sisters coming? And all of a sudden, this guy started talking. And all the time, I thought he was like Latino or Native American. But when he opened his mouth with that Australian accent, he said, my wife, Rosalind. And I looked at him, I go, oh my God, these are the Aboriginal Australian people, And his wife, Rosalind, she was a dancer, but she was dancing for the, she was dancing for the dance theater. She was dancing with the Dance Theater of Harlem. So she was here on a special, because she was a dancer. I often wonder about her, whether or not, where is she still dancing, whatever. And then another crazy event that happened was Joan called me up, and she says, all the Russell Means and all the Amesters are here. Come down to my apartment. We're having a party. So when I went to the party, and I told this story to Brandon, and he didn't believe it. He says, Ma, that didn't happen. I said, yes, it did. And then finally he spoke with Joan Garabita, and she goes, yeah, Brandon, that's a true story. So I'm just going to read this one. One of my most mind-bending moments was seeing Sue's dance salsa. Upon entering my friend Joan's apartment, there were Lakota guys in cowboy hats and pointy Western boots with long braids swirling to the rhythm of the Fania All-Stars. It seems Russell, before he was an American Indian movement leader, was a dance teacher in Cleveland. Who knew the braids and shades crowd could salsa like that? It was almost like a Fellini movie. So, and then I might have mentioned that Muhammad Ali came to support us, and again, Joan called me and said, "Get yourself down to, just get yourself down to the statue, the ferry, you know, to the Statue of Liberty. Muhammad Ali's coming to support the American Indian movement." And Lorraine Canoe was there. A lot of other people were there. But Muhammad Ali, he assigned Joan and I to do security for his girlfriend/wife, girlfriend. I don't know if they were married, if that was his girlfriend, but probably the mother of his children, because she's very beautiful, and the daughter that looks like, there's a daughter that looks like her. So she was wearing these really uncomfortable shoes called candies, which were like stilettos. They made with wood, and they had like a leather with a metal clasp. A little bit before a lot of your times, but they were like, you know, very glamorous but uncomfortable. So Vicky says she remembers them. She was wearing candies, and she was like, her feet were hurt. She was so all dolled up, but not for hanging out with us. So we were her security, and Muhammad Ali told me, whatever she wants, you know, do whatever she wants, whatever. So then he walked ahead and he got ice cream, and he was standing there eating his ice cream, and then we were all like watching him. And then he turned around and he looked at us and he says, "Oh," he says, "You got some ice cream too?" "Yeah, we want ice cream." We want ice cream. So he bought everybody an ice cream cone. And Monica, who is Lorraine's daughter, sent some pictures on Facebook to me of them sitting on his lap eating an ice cream cone. He was a really funny guy. And then he got in front of the press and he said, so I don't know, Ty, you said question above? Ty?
Oh yeah, Ty had a question about when you were traveling across Turtle Island, if you could tell your younger self advice, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my God. You know, it was very scary. Listen to the advice that the elders give you, the things that they say to you, and you say, "Oh, that's outlandish. Don't leave your drink," and, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, be careful. It was, you know, I had a lot of dangerous, unpleasant things happen to me that I'm not going to talk about tonight. But yeah, listen to your elders. I mean, and pray, because sometimes, you know, like giving birth, Brandon, yeah. Listen to your elders, because they will give you the best advice, because they, you know, they've lived through it. They have experience. You know, the younger people don't have the experience. They have to listen to elders. If the elders tell them, you know, be careful, don't hang out with these people, whatever. You know, but you know, when you're young, you think you know it all and no one can tell you anything. But you know, I had some very scary experiences. But you know, that's the price of life. You know what I mean? I mean, you're not going to get through life without being scarred a little bit, you know, because that's what makes you, that's what builds character. You don't You don't learn anything when your life is easy and you have everything you know. You learn when you have hardship and you go through some bad stuff. That's when you learn stuff. You don't learn stuff when you're having a good time. So yeah. So Muhammad Ali and then I have a girlfriend named Barbara Namayas, and she lives on the reservation up in what they used to call you're welcome, Ty. They used to call St. Regis. What, they don't call it that anymore? You know? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I went up there and I'm gonna read the blip. Now I understand, or Mohawk grandmas and wine bottles. My friend Barbara and I visited her res in the mid-1970s, the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation on the border of upstate New York and Canada. She said her kitchen was in the USA and her living room was in Canada. So we went back and forth to say we were international travelers and had a good laugh. We also brought some Matus wine that was in a beautifully shaped and little dark colored bottle with the label of a Portuguese landscape. I have been accustomed to drinking Matus in the painting studio at New York University with my fellow painting student, Randy. And we would get a buzz and critique our work. We thought we were cool. Well, anyway, back on the res, there were two little grandmas who were sitting and watching us drink the wine. Even with all the drama of me throwing up after drinking that sulfur water, they remarked that I shouldn't have drunk the water, but remained steadfast, waiting. We didn't realize they had fallen in love with the wine bottle and were waiting patiently for us to finish so they could use it as a vase. Now I understand that I'm at the grandma stage, that I have become like them. And that was, you know, in our, and then there was a place that was the Broadway Charlie days. I don't know if anybody remembers those days. There was this place, it had on Broadway called Broadway Charlie's. It was on 13th or 12th Street on Broadway near the community house. And I had a girlfriend that lived around, you know, she had a loft on 11th Street, and it became an Indian bar for a while. I remember being asked to do some kind of weird something, and I was really upset with this person. And at the time, I wasn't sure whether I was pregnant or not, you know, but I remember Sugga Cook, and she said to me, you know, Nadema, if you're pregnant, you better not drink, you know? And she warned me, and she gave me that. I mean, it just takes one person to tell you something, you know, that will like make an impression. And Sugga made an impression on me. She said, you know, if you're pregnant, you know, you shouldn't be drinking, you know? And so we were at this place, but there was this guy who showed up, and he was Seminole, and he was with this other guy who was a non-Indian guy, but he was like they had run away from a prison camp or something. And the guy had like all these scratches. And then we asked them, well, why do you have all these scratches? And they said, well, you know, they were running after us with dogs and stuff. We were running in the woods and everything. How they got to New York, I don't know. But they were at Broadway Charlie's, and they would ask everybody for cigarettes. And then if you offered them cigarettes, they would take like, you know, 18 of your cigarettes and leave you 2 cigarettes, you know. They were characters. And then there was a girl named Holly who had a party, and she was a native, you know, she was from the community house, and she had a party. She lived on 72nd Street. She had a really good job. She had a cute little apartment. And we all like try to get away from those guys because they were like really scary. And so we jumped in a cab, and Brandon's father and I, you know, we were at the time, we were married, and we jumped in the cab and we said, let's get out of here. Let's not, you know, hang out with those guys. And I remember Mitchell Bush, Mike Bush's brother was there. When we got there to Holly's apartment, those same guys were there. they were in Holly's apartment. We was like, how we try to get away from them. And then there was a Halloween party at Holly's when Bobby Yanko came as a blonde, and we all sang Wasted Days and Wasted Nights by Freddie Fender. Remember that song? And that was for Dace Means, you know, Russell's brother Dace. So we used to, you know, his name was Dace, so it Wasted Days and Wasted Nights, you know, and he came in, everybody would start laughing. And so I was married to Melvin Tubby, Brandon's father, and he was a real character. And he passed away maybe 20 something years ago. He was very young when he died, but he and I were living in New York when Brandon was born, and then we split up, and he went down to Mississippi. But he got diagnosed with cancer, and then he called me and he said, Dima, and we were already split up. I think we're already divorced and everything. And he says, Dima, he says, why don't you come down to Mississippi and make some fried bread and chili for me? And he was diagnosed with cancer, you know. So I said, okay. So I drove. I didn't really have money or whatever, but my mom and Brandon, we got in the car and we drove down to Mississippi, and I made him fried bread and chili. And so this is what I wrote about him. My most unforgettable person. At Sonny Bono's funeral, Cher said that he was the most unforgettable person in her life. Well, I guess you can say that about my first husband, Melvin. I met him at the Dartmouth powwow and he was playing a guitar. I remember that he followed me to the dorm room where I slammed the door on his face. The next morning, he was undaunted and cheerful, even though I treated him so rudely. Then that afternoon, we started playing volleyball and I enjoyed his company reluctantly. That afternoon, I went up to my room to get my luggage and a voice came to me and said, you are going to marry this man. And I yelled in my spirit voice, no way. No way was I going to marry a guy named Melvin Tubby. I packed my bags as fast as I could and was ready to go back to the city. It was very frightening to be so pursued by this young man. Some weeks later, I came home to find Melvin sitting on the staircase in front of my door, and the rest is history. My brother was upset with me because he said, how can you go out with a guy who has no neck? And besides, he's so short. My girlfriend Joan told me that he was the most hairless guy she had ever seen. In any event, we got married without a lot of fanfare at City Hall, followed by a reception at my friend Terry and Peter's loft. It was quite informal, as many of our guests were wearing t-shirts that had tuxedos printed on them. Melvin loved chili and fried bread parties. People would come from miles and have fried bread. And of course, everyone wanted to drink Coors beer, but it was really difficult to get it in the East. So as I mentioned, a group of guys, you know, a group of guys came from Oklahoma. At one point or another, there was the community house, the people in the community house that worked there. There were a lot of people that worked there that, you know, don't work there anymore. But I remember when the community house was on 38th Street, when my husband was working there, my brother was working there, Harry Wallace, Chief Wallace was working there, Carol Van Norman, she was Lakota, she was there, Joan Garabedian, and a lot of other people. And I had my baby shower there for Brandon. And the wife, what's her name? She's an actress. I'm having a moment. Joe Cross's wife. Does anybody know her name?
Her name, Donna?
Donna Couton. I'll never forget, Donna was so sweet. She got me all these little baby undershirts for Brandon, you know, and you know, and it was, and then Ina McNeil, she was the first person to hold him, and there was a guy named Juan Aguilar that used to work there, and then there was a guy named Rainbow, I forget his name, Joaquin Rainbow. He was transgender, he was an artist, and there was all kind of people coming through there. I don't know if that is Penna's brother, but I don't know. I mean, she never mentioned that that was her brother, but anyway, there was another family there that they were musically inclined, and they opened up a restaurant, a Native American restaurant for a while. I can't remember their names, but they were brothers. They were Native brothers, and their uncle opened the restaurant, and I can't remember their name, but you know, there were so many different shifts of people from one community house to the other. Because I'm like thinking of all the people on 38th Street, but then, you know, like I said, the first time I met Lance, he was in the stroller. Rosemary rolled him out of the elevator, and then she told me that, you know, he wouldn't go to sleep, and then she had to drive him around, you know, in the car for him to fall asleep, and then that was that I remember Mike Bush was the director of the community house, and then Rosemary was the assistant director, but really Rosemary ran the ship. She did all the work. She did everything. And
Nadema, Lance had a question about 38th Street. He asked did you used to go to Schraft's on the corner of 38th Street? He remembers as a kid, they had all these fancy hors d'oeuvres during happy hour.
I don't remember going there, but I recall people going there. I don't particularly remember going there.
And Brandon shared a couple of photos in the chat that I can pull up here and share my screen. So
yeah, let's see them.
Our audience can see them. So I've never done the share screen before. So let me try that. And then Facebook land can see it. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Let me know what are you seeing right now?
Yep.
Oh. Hey.
Okay, so here's a cup. Yeah, there we go.
Oh my God, look at Brandon. Is that Lance? Where did you get those pictures? I've never seen that one.
Where's Brandon? Is Brandon there?
Yeah, that's Brandon right at the center.
Yeah.
There, I unmuted you, Brandon.
97.
That looks like Lance with the...
That is Lance.
Huh?
That is Lance.
I thought so. And that's the back of Kevin's head.
Yeah, it's Kevin's head, back of his head, yep.
There's a couple more photos that I had ready to go here also. I don't know if you want to talk about these, Nadema.
Oh, well, let me look at them and...
Okay, let's start with this one in the gallery. No, I don't know which gallery that is. Do you see it?
No.
No? Oh, hang on. Okay.
Still,
Let me try a different share.
still the first picture that I see.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, that was taken recently. That's my artwork, because I was invited in a show, and would you believe it? The daughter of Dace Means was one of the curators, and she came to have lunch with me, and I told her that story because I said, well, who's your father? And she said, Dale. I said, well, we knew a Dace. She goes, that's Dace. Dale was Dace. So that she's the daughter, one of the curators of the show. She's the daughter of Russell Means's brother, Dace Means.
Nadema,
So-
I'm trying to remember, where was this? I remember when this was.
It was,
this exhibition.
it's right, it was in Queens,
Yeah, yeah.
at the Queensborough Community College. It's a Jewish Holocaust Center.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And it's still supposed to be if it wasn't for the coronavirus, it would still be up because the show was, yeah, you're right, Ty. We need to get this piece at the Whitney. If you have any, pull any strings, please do. So, and I like showing this piece because it's about New York, and it's called Wampa Moons of Change. And it's about the meeting of the Lenape people with the Dutch. So if you see the first part, the first one on the upper left is a Dutch house. And then the next thing is squash, which is, every other symbol is like Lenape or Dutch. So the first symbol is Dutch. The second one on the top is squash, like the corn beans and squash. And then there's a coin with a crescent moon. Then there's tobacco. Then there's a windmill. And then there's beans. And then there's the beaver on the blue moon. Then there's the wampum shell. There's the turtle, grandma moon, corn, and the half moon, which was what was the name of the boat that Henry Hudson had. So that was a really important piece called Wampa Moons of Change, because it's about New York City, the original Lenape people. It's a tribute to the original Lenape people. And the fact is that my grandmother, like I said to you, her father was Native American. He was Powhatan from Virginia, but her mother was predominantly Dutch. So I said, well, this is a tribute to both of them, the Dutch and the Algonquin nation, because the Virginia Powhatans, those people are related to the people up here. They're all Algonquin nation people, very similar culturally. So yeah, so and then at the bottom is a braid of sweetgrass. Now that sweetgrass was given to me by the community house one year. We had an event, and it was like, the ribbon is the purple of the wampum. And so I included that in it's soft sculpture, canvas. I start with canvas, and then I stuff things and glue them, and then I paint and add things, and it's one of my favorite pieces, I forgot to send those other pieces, Tanis. I'm sorry. I completely forgot to send them.
Well, we have this one too.
Oh, this one is like, I was invited to do a show, and it represents the cosmic mother of the four colors. So the one on the left is a mirror, but it's also a birth opening. So when you look into the mirror, it says all of them are your mother. And then the breast image is the cosmic goddess, of the four sacred colors of humanity. So it's all about, the unity of humanity and understanding that we're all related. So that was a neighborhood show that I had this in, and it was one of those pop-up galleries with, no frills gallery. You can still see the seams on the wall. But anyway, that was the first time I exhibited. And then this was a picture that I think my son took this picture.
Oh, hell yeah.
Huh? What?
I said, hell yeah.
Yeah, and that was at that event that we had in the Armory about
For
a
King
year and a half
Lenape.
ago. Huh?
It was for King Lenape.
Yes. Yes, and I was wearing all of my Algonquin native stuff and some of my Cherokee stuff. But that shirt was given to me by a Potawatomi woman And then I have my wampum, and then I had a wraparound skirt. So that was a fantastic event that, you know. And then, oh, that's a picture of
everyone see this
Brandon and his dad.
Yeah, so I sent those pictures for a little context.
Yeah, I have the other one here. I'm gonna try to open.
Yeah, that's pictures of Brandon's dad. And that's me and his dad. And he's wearing one of my chokers. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing those.
And that one was taken by my stepfather. Who said what?
Oh, I just said thanks for sharing the photos.
No, Ty said Dayum. What?
Oh,
What's
no
that?
brills, damn
only-
that choker.
Oh,
Mom only.
is that what he's trying to say? Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I really, and you know, when he passed away, he was wearing a choker like that. It was just like he always wore a choker, so they put it on him, you know. And he died really young. He wasn't even 50 years old. He was about 47. He had cancer.
There.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions to ask me? Oh, I have one more thing I want to read. You played my husband on Lou Grant. My friend Joan called me on the phone one night and told me to quickly turn on the television. There was a very popular show on at the time called Lou Grant. It seemed that the episode that evening was about a young Native American married couple who suspiciously resembled my husband and I. While the wife's character was a teacher and liked to visit museums, the husband was more of a grassroots person and preferred pool halls. The actor Ray Tracy, who played the husband, was a person I met about 5 years later at the night of the First Americans in DC. I walked up to him and said, "You don't know me, but you played my husband on Lou Grant." We just laughed. It was a precious moment. Wish I could track down the screenwriter. Maybe he owes me some royalties. Anybody have any requests or questions?
I have to go because I got to go out into the streets real quick. I'm really glad I got to do this. I don't get to see my mom because of obvious reasons. And, you know, I'm out in the world working as an essential worker. So I still have to see and talk to people on a daily basis and look at their dumbness without masks and gloves and just acting like life is normal. You know, many of you know, I don't know if many of you know, but we live out here in the Hamptons, and they're literally just walking around like nothing is wrong. Like they're just still walking around and holding hands and talking to each other and grouping, and it's really it's real frightening. So this is a real nice birthday surprise. So
Oh,
thank
could
you.
you hold on 1 second, Brandon?
I wish I could.
Well, then I'll
have
see
to
you
go.
later because I have to light the candles on your cake.
Yeah, I know, but all right.
All right.
You can relight them for me later.
Okay, I'll
All right,
light them. I'm not going to relight them. I'll light them.
Okay.
Ciao. Where are you going?
Out.
Out? Okay.
Celebrate his birthday.
Celebrate his birthday. I don't know where he's going. But anyway, yeah, so does anybody have any questions or?
There were a couple that were typed in earlier that hadn't got to yet. One from way back. Did you go to, I think this was Ty, did you go to Indian Summer Festival in Milwaukee or near there with AIM?
Probably, you know. I've been to Milwaukee, but I was in Milwaukee. See, I forgot to mention that I lived in Minnesota for 4 years. And then I lived in North Dakota because in 1995, I got invited to be the repatriation director for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And I moved out to North Dakota and I lived in Bismarck and I worked for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe as their repatriation director. But before that, I was married. I had a second husband that I married who was also a very good looking Ojibwe. So I don't, you know, I learned my lesson. So, you know, I lived in Minnesota. I lived in Bemidji, Minnesota for 4 years. I was married to this man. And I taught at the university. I taught painting, drawing. I had art shows, you know. And so I did that. And then I lived in North Dakota. And what I have done in New York City is that my career in New York City went from teaching, and then I worked as, I went to apply to be an artist in residence at the Museum of the American Indian. And the director said, you know, you're qualified to run this program. So I took that job and I ran this program called So the Spirit Flows. And it was a program of visiting Native artists from the Western Hemisphere. We had people from North America, South America, the Caribbean. We had people from all over. And at the time, we didn't have funds for the stay at hotels. So guess where they stayed? In my apartment. And Brandon used to say, Mom, when am I going to sleep in my own bed? You know, because there was always some Indians coming through. They were always staying and spending, you know, the week. It was like once a month, there was some Indian person staying in my apartment because that was the way it was. And it was a beautiful experience for 7 years. And I remember there was a Pueblo lady that came. She was a potter from Laguna, Pueblo. And she was, you know, she was arriving in the airport. I had a car and I drove my little Volkswagen Rabbit to pick her up. And I went up to her and I said, are you Evelyn Jeremiah? And she looked at me. She says, yeah, how did you know? I says, well, you're Indian and you look scared. And she started laughing, you know. But she stayed with me. And then another time she called me. She had to come to New York for something special. And she says, I don't want to stay at the hotel. I want to stay with you. I said, but Evelyn, I only have one bed. You'd have to sleep in the bed with me. She goes, I don't care. So she slept in the bed with me. She didn't want, you know, there was such a trust and love that, you know, I bonded with all of these people from all over the Western Hemisphere and communities. So it was like everywhere that I went in Indian country, I knew someone who had come, you know, to the program that I could, you know, stay with. So when I went to New Mexico, you know, and Oklahoma Indians, I had Oklahoma Indians here, Cherokee from Oklahoma, and Micmacs, all kinds. And then the most interesting of the most funny experience I had was with this Tlingit artist. Her name is, well, you know, she was a weaver and she was really gorgeous. And she wanted to go out every night after, you know, she demonstrated, but it was like wearing on me because, you know, we had to get up early and I had a kid and she wanted to go. So one night my brother got us tickets to a very special club. And we got there and she wore a red sequin dress. This was in the early 80s. She wore a red sequin dress. No, it wasn't Studio 54. It was after Studio 54. But it was like that. It was like you only could go if you had tickets or whatever. So when we got there was somebody on a, like they have in the circus, the people that swing. No, it wasn't the Palladium either. I can't remember what it was called, but Rick James was there. So, so there were all these people waiting online to get his autograph, and Anna Brown Ehlers, which is her name, came to me. She put her hand on her hip. When she got to speak to him, she goes, my name is Anna Brown Ehlers from Juneau, Alaska. And she was gorgeous. She was breathtaking. And So he just, you know, he was taken with her. So he invited us to sit with him. And then he bought her. I don't drink alcohol. I stopped drinking alcohol in the late 70s. So I didn't drink, but because I was like really, I had some Mohawk guys really straighten me out about that when I was at Harry Belafonte's house having a drink, and they said, you know, that really destroys your brain cells. And they said in such a loving and caring way that I never forgot that. And it really affected me. And I decided to stop drinking because of those guys, you know, that they told me that. So yeah, I know. So they were, I can't remember their names. I can't remember. They were really quiet guys that were sitting on the couch, and they said, you know, you really shouldn't drink. So, you know, I stopped drinking when after I stopped drinking when Brandon was born. Melvin and I decided to go out after 6 weeks. You know, after he was, you know, 6 weeks old, we decided to go out for a night out with our friends. And when I came home the next morning, Brandon was screeching and I had a hangover. And that was it, man. That was the end. I stopped drinking after that. That was the end. I stopped drinking. So at this point, I wasn't drinking in the 80s because Brandon was about 5 or 6 years old or whatever. And Anna was still, you know, so he bought her some champagne and I said, I'll have some ginger ale. So I had the ginger ale and she was sitting right next to him and I was sitting across from him. And then she looks at him and she said, she was kind of bored because he didn't really say anything to her, but she turned to him and she goes, you know, Rick, do you think you could drive Nadema and I home tonight? And he goes, sure. He says, and then these rugged looking guys come out of nowhere. They look like they were thugs and killers, you know, and they were scary looking, you know. And I looked at them and I said, you know, Anna, if you want him to give you a ride, that's fine. I am not getting in a car with those guys. I'll take a cab home. But she said, well, she says, I'm from Alaska. I'm like, I'm used to men being on me like white on rice. I said, well, Anna, this is New York City. You just another pretty face. There's a lot of pretty girls in New York, you know, because she just couldn't understand why he was so boring. And, you know, he didn't have that much to say, but she decided to go home with me. She took my hint and I said, let's go. So we went to the Hard Rock Cafe and had dinner, just the two of us. It was right across from the Hard Rock Cafe, if that's any hint of what that club was or where it was. It was right across from the Hard Rock Cafe.
Where was the Hard Rock Cafe back then? I don't know where that was.
That was on 57th Street.
Okay.
See, Brandon, you know, Brandon went to Bank Street. I worked at the museum full time and we did weekend gigs with the Little Rabbit Dancers. We had the Little Rabbit Dancers. So I had a lot of stuff going on. I ran the arts program at the museum. I ran the, you know, the educational stuff. I did installations. We did film festivals. We did celebrations. I did a lot of stuff. And then I worked on the weekend to make money because the money I made at the museum wasn't enough. It was very little money. I took a pay cut to take that job, you know, because I was making more money as a teacher. So we had a dance group called the Little Rabbit Dancers. They were children. And we used to go around and educate people about Native American tradition. And Brandon was the, you know, the key dancer. He was, and we used to do stories like how Coyote fell in love with the star. And then he would play Coyote and TC's daughter would play the star. And then there was Stephanie Betancourt. She was from Six Nations. Her kids were part of the group. And so, and then while I was at the museum, I got a National Endowment for the Arts. Was it I think National Endowment for the Arts? I forget. But I was invited to travel to the Southeastern United States to create a directory called the Southeastern Native Arts Directory, which was published eventually. So I did that when I was at the museum. And and it eventually got published when I was at Bemidji State University when I was living in Minnesota. But one of the other projects that I was very proud of was the Indigenous Geography of New York City that I did in 2009, 2010. And I profiled the New York City indigenous community. I interviewed people, there were essays written, we videotaped events, powwows, Matariki, Inti Raymi, the the Andean celebration, Matariki, the Maori Polynesian New Year, and the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, and the powwow in Louis Mofsey's powwow they have every year, Queens Farm Museum. So all of that stuff is documented and it's written, you know, but it was, you know, I got paid by the Smithsonian. Yeah, Tyen. Is that Tyen?
Yeah, I think I might have to change the settings so you can share.
Oh, Marisol, are you from the Andean community?
Oh, hang on, Marisol, I'll unmute you.
Everyone is mute. You gotta unmute people.
No, I unmuted everybody.
Yes, my dad, he's from the Quechua people, so Inti Raymi is in June, and it's so colorful. I love the dancers, it's so beautiful. You know, I went there in the summer and seeing all the, you know, colorful patterns, and my grandma gave me the blanket because, you know, she was part of that community too. She loved to dance, so I just love that culture so much. I love the festival so much. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, I'm glad you started talking to me, because I forgot to mention that as part of the visiting artist program that I ran, I had people from the Andes. Tawantin Suyo was a group of musicians, and they used to play pan pipes. And then there was a group, a guy from Bolivia. He had a group called Achachila, and then there was another group. And so what happened was that they had a party for someone who was from Peru, and they all came to my apartment. They said, we don't really, you know, get together, Peruvians, Ecuadorians, and Bolivians. We don't necessarily get together.
Yeah.
But we're gonna come for you, Nadema. So all of these Peruvians, Ecuadorian, Bolivian people were in this apartment playing El Condor Pasa in the original Quechua language. My hair, like, I started crying. It was the most beautiful thing I had experienced. And people brought food from, you know, coastal food. They brought food that was from the Andes, papa la huancaína. Somebody brought, you know, a seafood, you know, like food from South America. And so that was really, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was a big, you know, big part of the program was there were people from South America, Central, you know, from all of the Americas.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
Thank you for that. And what was the picture that Tyen had?
I just opened it up, so I'm gonna try to share just that pic.
Okay.
We'll see. Let me know if you see it.
Oh, there they are. Oh, she's got that picture. The little rabbit dancers. Yeah, we went up to Maine one time. We went to Pennsylvania. We went all over the place.
Wow.
So, yep. That's really adorable. Everybody see that? The little rabbit dancers. And then the other thing that I was involved with was the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And I came back to New York in '97, and then I wound up, and then I eventually got a job at the Smithsonian back. Basically, it was my old job, but it was like bigger than that, you know? But I had set the foundation for all the programs that they had there which were run by different people. I had done all their jobs, one person. So I went back to the museum, and at that time, I ran it was like a visiting artist program, but the artists would go to different institutions and I would arrange for them to come at the Smithsonian. And I also was at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, because after I left the museum, when they decided to transfer my job to DC, I couldn't go to DC, so that was the end of that gig. But I wound up working as a consultant for the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and I wrote the protocol for Indigenous people, like how they had, you know, because the UN doesn't have Indigenous protocol, it has nation state protocol. And I explained to them that our idea of nation isn't necessarily a country with borders, you know, like a nation state, that it's the community of people, and all the different subtleties of dealing with people and elders, and, you know, when you speak, not to have your back to the elders, and, you know, when elders speak, you don't interrupt them, you know, things that you learn in the course of living. So I did that for a while. And then that was around the time that Tanya Frichner was representing North America. And we were very proud of her, you know, coming in there. And I remember Tanya when she first started working at the community house, and she was a model. And everybody thought she was just going to be, you know, a pretty face, and she really fooled everybody. She went to law school, and then she became a leader in our community, a very wonderful leader in our community, and always very loving and supportive of everyone. And so, you know, I'm just trying to figure, like, did I miss something that I did, you know, besides all the art shows that I've been in. I've been a curator of many art shows, and I curated a show that I was very proud of. It was called the Fort Apache Connection, and it was in the Bronx at the Longwood Art Gallery. But what I did was I brought Apache artists from Arizona and New Mexico to exhibit in the Bronx, because the Bronx section, that section of the Bronx used to be called Fort Apache. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I brought people that were Apache to meet the people that were called Apaches and maligned by, you know, the colonizer. It was very political. It was very powerful. It was completely mind-blowing, and nothing like that had ever been done, because we had Douglas Miles, who did skateboards. He's Apache. And I said, well, do something, do a tribute to the Puerto Rican people in the Bronx, or the, you know, African American and Puerto Rican people in the Bronx, because they're the Bronx Apaches, you know, because the cops, the precinct was called Fort Apache because they considered the people, like, you know, like in the John Wayne movie, the enemy. So there were people that protested against that. Yeah, Apache skateboard. And so Douglas did Pachi Ramos on one skateboard. He did Rita Moreno. I think I can't remember all the Puerto Rican La India, and I think Hector Lavoe. I'm not sure if I remember all the Puerto Rican or Boricua people that. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful because for me. When I was a little girl, I lived a couple of blocks away from that gallery, you know, it wasn't there yet, but that's, you know, I lived there, and it was like so crazy. I said, oh my God, this is like 2 blocks away from where I lived as a child. So it was like, and then my grandmother was born in the Bronx. So it's like my tribute to my Bronx roots, but also being a Native American, but also being a Native person who really hung out with a lot of Puerto Ricans, because they were the closest thing to Indians that I met in New York City. And they had a lot of traits like Indian people, real, you know, warm and generous. And So I was a, you know, Lakota that ran with the Ricans, and I used to go salsa dancing and stuff like that, you know. And so it was my love, you know, it was my love letter to them, you know, it was my love letter to them. It's like, I love you guys. You always made me feel like loved and welcome, you know. So so that was, you know, and then you know, I did teach junior high school for many years, 7 years at one school and a couple of more years at another school. But one of the funny things that happened was that Playboy magazine had a centerfold, and she was a Native American woman. So everybody at the school thought it was me. And then one day, one of the students ran by and he said in Spanish, you know, like basically Miss Boobies, you know? And he went by, he goes, Missy Teta. And I go, what? And I was like, I knew Spanish. So I said, what? And I went to the principal and I said, Gustavo came over, he came past my room and he called me Missy Tetas. What the heck? And then later on, I found out like 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years later, I found out from a student that I met on Facebook. He said, Miss Agard. He could still, even though he was 60, he couldn't call me Nadema. He said, Miss Agard. Everybody thought that was you. I said, well, now I understand why that kid called me that. He says, Monty had that. And he said, Miss Agard, is this you? And I said, no, Monty, it's not me. Just because she's got long hair with a part in the middle and she's Native American doesn't mean she's me, you know? And you know, so they all thought that I was in Playboy. But I also got taken for a Playboy bunny in New Jersey. I was in a supermarket and this woman came up to me and she says, because there was a Playboy club nearby, and she said to me, she says, are you, I think it was like, yeah, it was in New Jersey. And a friend of mine had this cabin and we went and bought some cheese and we were gonna, you know, put the fire on the cabin and hang out. And this woman came up to me and she goes, do you work at the Playboy Mansion? And I said, no, I'm a junior high school teacher. Then another lady in New Mexico, she thought I was a Mexican soap star. And I lived in Spain for a summer. I took Spanish and I'm fluent in Spanish. I lived in Italy. But when I lived in Spain, of course, I learned to speak fluent Spanish. And I was in New Mexico and this woman says, ya la conozco. I know you. And I looked at her and she goes, ya la conozco. I know you. And I said, what? And she says, oh, you know. And then she told her daughter, and her daughter told me, oh, she thinks she won a soap actress from a soap in Mexico. And I said, no, yo soy maestra. And she said, it's maestra, because maestra is the way they speak like an old Spanish in New Mexico that the Spaniards had spoke when they first came in the 17th century. Now, I forgot about my Italian days. I went to summer school in Italy and I had an Italian boyfriend named Alessandro. And, you know, I learned I learned Spanish and I lived in a Spanish town for 2 months. So I was fluent, you know, I left speaking Spanish. I got there saying, my name's Nadema Agard and I live here. But I left speaking Spanish because nobody spoke English in this little town. And when I got off the bus from Madrid, the guy pushed me aside and he says, get out of the way. I want to see the American. And my girlfriend, my Spanish girlfriend, she's so cool. I love her because that's why we're friends, because she told me, you know, the Spaniards were killed. They destroyed everything because they knew the Indian people were smarter than them. So I knew I was going to love her, you know. And she told the guy in Spanish, you imbecile. She is a real American. Then when they all found out I was Native American, everybody wanted to meet me. And I felt like Queen Elizabeth. They were all shaking my hand. They were online. And I was so exhausted. By the time I got to their house, I passed out. I was so tired. And I lived in a little Spanish town called Daimiel, which is where Pedro Almodovar lived next door in the next town. So when I saw the movie Volver, I don't know if any of you seen that movie, but I felt like, oh my God, that reminds me of when I was in Spain. And I called up Maria Isabel, who now lives in Milan. And I called her and I said, Maria Isabel, she never learned English. So I said to her, you know, that reminds, she goes, you went to his town. He's from here. You went to Almagro. He's from the next town over, you know? So that all his stuff, when he, you know, I was there. And then I went to Greece. I studied in Greece. And I remember that I wanted to go to this art center in Greece because I could get free credits from NYU and, you know, towards my degree. So I wanted to take summer classes and go to Greece. And I went to Greece and I got off the boat and I kept on asking people, where's the art center? And nobody spoke English, and they spoke Greek, but they didn't speak English. And I was really scared. I said, oh man, I got scammed. And all of a sudden I heard this New Jersey accent. And I was never so happy to hear a New Jersey accent. You're looking for the egg in the art center? Looking for the egg in the art center? And I go, oh my God, it was so, and it was like an art center with people from all over the world. And that famous beat poet, Gregory Corso, was there. And every other word out of his mouth was MF. He couldn't have a conversation without cursing. And there was a guy named Max who had a boat. And we had rooms in the, you know, when we were there, but then after the classes were over, we didn't have anywhere to stay. So Max said we could all sleep on his boat. So we all slept on his boat, and he had a boat that slept 13 people. So we were on his boat, but he was like docked on the island. He wasn't, you know, it wasn't out on the water. It was docked. And it was he had nicer things in his boat than I had in my apartment. Darn, you know. The guy could speak 5 languages. Anyway, Gregory came to one of our parties. We were making pasta, and he started saying MFs, and Vija Vetra was from India. She was a exotic dance, Indian dancing, classical dancing. She says, oh, you can't even, you got to leave. We can't put up with you. You know, and we threw Gregory Corso off the boat.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And that was a beautiful, beautiful little island. And I did this watercolor up on my wall, is from Egina. But when I lived in Italy, I was going to summer school and I had an Italian boyfriend. And this is a story how we met. It's very short because we're running out of time. But we all came from NYU and Fordham University to do summer classes in Rome. And when we got there, the Roman government wasn't working. Italian government was dysfunctional. So, and they didn't, like, if they didn't have change, they gave you candy, you know? And we had paid for a hotel. When we got to the hotel, we didn't have any rooms. So we're all in the lobby of the hotel, and all these Italian guys come in, and there's this real tall one. And he tells the other Italian guys to go and mingle with the girls. So he was like mingling, they were all mingling, right? And then they all came over to me and they said, Nadema, listen, you see that tall guy over there? He said, his friends will take us sightseeing, but you got to go with him. You got to go with him. And I was like, oh no, that's like extortion. What the heck? I was really pissed off. They go, come on, man, don't be a, wet blanket, man. We want to go sightseeing, you know? So then I decided, I got in the car with him, but I didn't talk to him. So when we got to the Coliseum, everybody jumped out, oh, the Coliseum. And then we jumped in there and we go another side, everybody jumped out, we jumped back in. Then we get to the Trevi Fountain. At this point, I noticed that there was no other cars. It was just him. And we were sitting in his car in front of the Trevi Fountain. And he said to me, I hadn't talked to him at all for 2 hours. So I was just there, and he says in Italian, he said, vorrei caramello, would you like a candy? And I said, no. And he said, vorrei cigarette. I said, no. And then he said, "Vorrei gelati?" And then that was ice cream. I said, okay. So he went and he got me an ice cream. And then he started talking to me, and then he says, "Listen, I'm so sorry, you know, that you have this, you know, whatever, but please forgive me. Will you go out with me tomorrow?" And I says, okay. So I went out with him the next day on a date, and he took me to his aunt's house. And his aunt and uncle had this big house with, there were all these people at dinner, you know, it was his family. And he tells everybody, "Oh, this is my fidanzata." I didn't know what that meant. It's like fiance. But he was telling people I was his fiance, you know? He was like heads over heel in love with me. I mean, awestruck. And sadly, we broke up because he was too jealous. But we reconnected in 2007. And I actually stayed with him and his wife. I was hoping she wouldn't poison me, you know, because you know how Italian women are really jealous.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Can you see it?
Little.
The picture?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so you see me, and that his sister's over my shoulder. I hadn't seen her since she was 16 years old. She's 53 in this picture. Yeah, I can show you the watercolor. And then that was Sandro, you know, now. And, you know, his wife is very sweet. But that was so funny. They took us to the Trevi Fountain, and Sandro and I looked at each other like, ha, 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 ha. They said, "Let's take Nadema to the fountain, to Fountain di Trevi." And we just looked at each other like, that's hysterical. And Sandro started yelling like from La Dolce Vita, and Anita Ekberg goes, "Marcello, Marcello." And he's going, you know, it's a real clown. I love him as a person. He's very funny. But he was too jealous as a boyfriend. I told him that. I said, "You know, you were just too damn jealous. You can't do that with Indian women." No. Yeah, I know he was. I know he was thrilled. And he, you know, he still hasn't gotten over me. He brought out some of the old pictures in front of his wife. I thought I was going to die. Like, oh my God. He brought out a picture of me in a bikini. Like, oh my God, that's a horrible picture. Put it away. I don't like my hair. Like, my hair looks terrible. Oh, I was like so embarrassed. Oh my God. You know, I mean, I was staying with them. But the son adores me. I adore his son. He's on Facebook with me. He's about 30 now. But, and, you know, I have a relationship with them, but it's a different kind of relationship. But yeah, but we, you know, Sandro took me out every night, every day after siesta, but he's very jealous. But the first dish that he ever treated me to was called spaghetti alla matriciana. So for my 71st, last year for my birthday, it was the 50th anniversary of my trip to Italy. So I had an Italian menu, and I made spaghetti alla matriciana to commemorate that, you know, that was my first meal. Italy was so much fun. Well, I lived a dolce vita every morning, got up and had espresso and the pastries. Oh my God. And the food was so good because we wound up staying at a convent. And the nuns used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and make the sauce fresh every morning. I couldn't eat Italian food in restaurants after I came back from Italy. It was just, you know, it was just bitter, you know, because they were so sweet. Oh, let me show you the, I'm going to try to see if I could show you the watercolor from, oh no. Let me put on the other lamp, maybe, because there's a lamp in the way. Where is it? Okay. All right. Let me see. There it is. There it is. There it is. See it?
Oh, wow.
That's the watercolor of the church.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So, I know it's 6:58, and I've had a wonderful time.
Oh, thank you.
Nadema, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Okay. All right. That was amazing. Awesome stories. I'm just interested in if you were to do another artistic project, what would that be like?
It would be about, it would be very New York centric, because I really feel it's important to tell our stories. So it would be something that had to do with indigenous New Yorkness, because we're a blend of that. Like if you see, Gloria, I mean, she's, no one's more New York than Gloria. You know what I mean? She's so New York, and I feel the same way about myself. I'm a New Yorker, So yeah, I would have to. When you say artistic, do you mean like visual arts, or do you mean like musical?
Well, I know right now the Smithsonian down by South Ferry, they have urban natives, and then MCNY had what was theirs called again?
Urban Indians.
Urban Indians.
Yeah.
But those are more like I'm talking about
that's
art.
like an appetizer. That's like an appetizer. We got to get the full course here. There's so much history here that needs to be known. That's like an appetizer. So yeah, they're doing blips and blips, but we got to do something bigger and grander.
Yeah, I agree. We're working on a 50 Winters project. Sheldon Raymore is spearheading that. We actually have a website, AICH50winters.org. And we're trying to fill in all those blanks from those years that we couldn't uncover all the, I guess, the newsletters, monthly newsletters. There's like a big chunk of like 20 years that we couldn't find any archives to fill in that history. So maybe that's a project where you could work a little bit more with us on that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And Rick, I'm waiting to see those pictures.
Yes. As soon as we can get back in the community house, I'm definitely gonna scan them.
Yeah, and to everybody, before this coronavirus, if this coronavirus wasn't happening, I'd be having a potluck every Sunday, because I cook all kind of dishes from everywhere. I travel around the medicine wheel because I can't travel, So I travel with my food. I said, okay, let's go to Hawaii today. Mm-hmm. I make Hawaiian dishes, or if I want to go to, Mexico, I make Mexican dishes. But yeah, Italian, Thai, Vietnamese.
You're going to cook for us, right?
I will. I'm going to cook up a storm. I have my corned beans and squash, my special version with Chico's from New Mexico.
Yes. Anybody else have any questions or comments before we close up? Take another 5 minutes.
I'm just so grateful, Nadema. This is so special for you to spend 2 hours talking to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I enjoy it. I mean, when I relive it, it's like, it makes me happy, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't even touch on. But
we gotta have part 2.
I try to get as much in there as I could. I mean, because, one time I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I remember like being really upset, that I couldn't do stuff. And my sister-in-law coined it. She says, Dima, but you've done a lot of shit, And, it's like, yeah, but I can't do this. But you've done a lot of stuff, So yeah, I have, but I still haven't finished my role on this plane. I still have work to do. I still have work to do, and I have so many lesson plans that are related to people of color. I have, I've done so many lectures with the New York, Foundation for the Humanities. I've done art workshops. I've taught. I've been a museum educator. I've been a repatriation director. I forgot to mention that for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. So, there's so many avenues to talk about, because I've done so many things. I can't even believe my own life,
Yeah.
But,
Nadema, thank you so much for your stories and sharing. And I'm all about part 2 and 3 and 4. And, I just really appreciate your time and want to thank you too, as, I know those stories and those memories, they all sort of attribute to the work that a lot of us are doing now too. And so just recognizing all of that work that you did, fighting and celebrating for our people. And that's something that, makes me want to keep doing this. And you are such an inspiration, for sure. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It means a lot to be, that all the things that I've done in my life, that I hope that, that something comes out of it that's very positive.
Nadema, it's an HBO series.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
hey, there's a lot of idiots out there doing stuff. So
Stop trying to give it away. It's art.
That memoir written so someone can option it.
That is the real. Your life is the
Not
real deal.
Netflix. It's an
I
AI.
can't make out what you're saying.
No, Netflix.
Both talking at the same time, I couldn't make out what you were saying. What did Melissa say?
Oh no, I said it's not a HBO series. It's not a Netflix series. It's an AICH series. Stop trying to give us away.
Yeah, we need a Native American show. We need, they have everybody on TV except Native Americans. They got Chinese people. They have, other ethnic groups, but they don't ever have shows with Native Americans in the United States.
You would be a soap opera.
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Okay.
Very Resi soap opera.
As the res turns.
Yeah.
Right? As the res turns. Or what's the what was the all my my different children. From different, different children.
All my relations.
Anyway, yeah.
All my relations.
Anyway, everybody's got a smile on their face. That is a good sign that I made you laugh, because I think that's so important. Laughter.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon enough we'll be sitting around a fire and you can tell us more.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I haven't been, working and volunteering with this organization for that long, but it's just like so captivating to hear your stories. And it's such an inspiration. And honestly, like, I hope to be doing work that, is life-changing for people. So just listening to you go through all those experiences is just like amazing.
Well, you're young and you can do it. And you can't say, I'll do it. Don't say, I hope I'm going to do it. You're going to do it.
Yeah. Pretty much.
You got to do it. You just, some people are talkers, some people are doers.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And Nadema, my internet went out right at the beginning, so I missed your introduction. I don't know how you were introduced, but you honestly need no introduction. I just feel like everybody, you're who you are, and everybody knows it. And I want you to know you're so important to our community, and so important to me personally.
Thank you very much. Hey. How do you know a dog is from Canada? He goes, bow wow, eh? Yeah. All right, people.
Thank you so much, Nadema. I know you and I had our own little conversation yesterday that I really enjoyed over the phone. And one day when this is over, we will finally get to meet in person. And we connected on some things that we found out about each other, our thoughts. And I just really wanted to thank you for being a part of this and sharing your stories and being so open and just taking the reins and running with it. It was fantastic.